Okay, we are live and it is almost 8:30. So in a few seconds here, just watching the clock. All right, 8:30 by my clock. So I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Call to the roll. All members are present, plus Chairman Bartlett. We've got Krista Van Oden with our tech support, Director Swirsky, and we are ready to roll. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
So moved.
Second it.
So that's Chuck and Randy, I think, in order. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Minutes are approved. Public comment. Krista, do we have anyone officially from the public?
No public comment.
All right, then no items to place the request of the chair. We are on to staff reports. John?
Perfect. I'm just going to touch on my highway report here for the month. Bill Hughes was the last of our retirees in this last batch here. His last day was January 28th. Since then, we've hired 4 new operators. Kyle Bovey, which he was an operator over at Chippewa County Highway. Josiah Schumacher was an operator from Hoffman Construction Company. And then Sam Hellman, we ended up taking from the village of Boyceville. And then next Monday, Jordan Kuhn works for Accurate Concrete here in Menominee. He's going to start. He'll be our 4th operator replacing our recent retirees. Jay Thompson, one of our former operators, was promoted to crew supervisor here, took Mark Bear's vacant position when Mark retired at the end of December. Winter maintenance has been going good. We've been doing a lot of brushing here with the nice weather. This week, it's been kind of limited to machine operation. And then we've been switching out the air filters and the air exchangers here in the shop and kind of taking care of truck cleaning and repair and just trying to keep the guys out of the cold there to reduce the risk of frostbite and such issues with the cold weather. Getting equipment started isn't always the funnest too on some of these mornings if it's not inside. So next week it looks like we're going to be hitting back to normal weather conditions. So we're going to head back out and continue the brushing. And then we'll get back to the patching and stuff like that. We fought a little bit of getting these roads cleared up here with that weather turning as fast as it did last week. We didn't have enough window to get the roads scraped off and get them dried prior to that temperature falling off and the kind of things glazing over. And it's just, once you get below that 19 degrees, that salt really doesn't do anything. So we're out there just trying to keep some grit down there with the sand. And when they glaze over too, that's a double-edged sword because either Mother Nature's wind or after about 6-7 passes with the vehicle, typically when they're glazed over like glass, it's hard to keep that grit on the road. So I've noticed though on E and C and J, the ones that I kind of have been traveling on here this last week, they have made quite a difference here in the last 2 or 3 days about clearing up. Even yesterday afternoon, it was 11 degrees at lunchtime when I went out there to kind of do a little road survey, and we were getting some wet areas. And when that sun now is powerful enough to where when it starts to draw to that pavement, it turns to liquid, and then we can get some evaporation with some traffic. So roads are looking pretty good considering the weather window that we went through here. Shop operations, we're still kind of in the repair mode. It's been minimal on the actual repair. A lot of it's been preventive maintenance. Right now we have the heavy haul truck in. We've had some issues with it jumping on a fourth and fifth gear in the transmission. And then we had a rear main, and then a rear cam seal has been dripping, and that's been getting worse and worse, and possible issue with a head gasket. So Preston and Al have had that in here, and they started tearing it apart. So we're going to get our heavy haul truck gone through and mechanically sound here before spring, when we got to start shuttling equipment around. We did hire a new stock room clerk, Brenda Wolf, who lives right here in Menominee, joined the team. She's been working out excellent, getting used to all the computer programs and getting used to the stock room and getting to know all the different faces around here. So she's working out very well. We're glad to have her on board. And then we're still in the process of recruiting mechanics. The list is very short of people to get in the door here to get interviewed, and hopefully within the next couple of weeks we can get some offers out for that. So that concludes pretty much my highway and shop operations. We have Preston Pearson from Mosaic Technologies here. He kind of wants to chime in on some utility permits. And I guess before we bring him on board here, Mosaic has 17 permits they applied for in February 25th of 2020. The 17 permits total $7,600. We were certified by the PSC for the broadband forward in July of 2020. July 13th is actually the date that the PSC certified us. So I'm going to let Pearson, I'm going to ask him to unmute there, and he can chime in here, and then we'll get the board's or the committee's take on Preston's comments.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Everything's good? All right. Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Preston Pearson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Mosaic Technologies. We are a company out of Cameron, Wisconsin, if everybody knows, or if anyone's aware. We were formerly Shebardin Telephone Cooperative, and we have traditional services out of which would be the Ridgeland, Sand Creek, Prairie Farm exchanges that cover New Haven, Sheridan, Wilson, Sand Creek, and Otter Creek, and part of Grant Township in northern Dunn County. Last year, John was correct, we did apply for some permits in regards to a really big investment and an expansion that we want to do to be able to make broadband obviously work in northern Dunn County and to be able to extend obviously to rural areas and people that are unserved. We are traditionally, again, a telephone company. We are still working on telephone lines. We want to replace that with fiber optic lines. So we are going very, very hard, very deep into getting fiber to the home to every resident, farmhouse, cabin, and so forth in those locations, in those areas. The Ridgeland project, which encompassed some of Sheridan and Wilson Township, was passing about 250 some customers, 300 and some homes, about a $4 to $5 million investment. Was done for that purpose. Again, we are trying to get as creative as we possibly can with funding opportunities and so forth. Right now, we're borrowing that money from a federal government loan opportunity through the U.S. Department of Agriculture to get that in and get that done. In 2021 here, we actually have the contract bidded out. We have it ready to go to sign to be able to get 280 more miles of fiber passing 1,000 people in Sand Creek, Otter Creek, Grant, New Haven, and finishing up the Sheridan and Wilson townships. What I'm requesting and what I would like to have happen here, and I know the timing of this is in terms of when the actual resolution was passed by the county, is I don't have my county permits yet for this new project that we're doing here in 2021, because we're still waiting. I know John and his crew is waiting on payment resolution for the actual permits that were done in 2020. We did receive the permits for 2020, so we did complete that project, but I know that the invoicing and the compensation needs to take place. I know that Dunn County is now broadband forward. What I would like to ask and request in the spirit of, I think the pandemic has definitely shown that everybody wants to work from home. We need kids to be able to be educated, that these people that we're currently hitting right now today are classified by the federal government and by the state government as unserved. They don't have sufficient broadband service in their facilities and in their homes and in their locations. It's leaving kids behind. It's letting people not necessarily being able to work sufficiently from home, not being able to do necessarily even this if you're in one of those farm locations or in one of those homes in that rural portion of the county. I would like to request that the 2020 Ridgeland project invoicing and permits, just in a sign of good faith between showing that Dunn County wants to work with us, to be done on a basis of broadband forward pricing. So to go back and just ask for that to be done on a consistent basis with the broadband forward regulations, which does lessen that amount of money considerably in terms of the permitting fees. And I'll pay those and move forward so we can move forward with the Prairie Farm Sand Creek projects. And that's what I'm basically asking for. Does anybody have any specific questions, or would you like some more information about what it is we're doing? Again, the investment that we're making into this 2021 project, it does extend into Barron County just a little bit on the north side, but this is mostly an investment in northern Dunn County. It's going to be almost $11 million investment to get fiber optic lines to everyone's home. We are offering 3 speed packages, 250 megs, and this is symmetrical up and down, 500 megs and 1 gig offering. So I mean, this is going to be really, really fast, really clean, really, really good service that people are going to get. Broadband's important. I think this pandemic has definitely shown that this is something that's obviously well needed by those people in those rural townships.
So one thing out of curiosity, and then another thing. So you're doing mostly microtunneling, or are you hanging the fiber in heavy conduit, or?
Conduit in some parts, but it's all underground.
Okay.
Buried cable. We do not put duct in the ground to people's homes themselves, but we do have an armored fiber that we put in the ground to keep the critters and so forth from chewing that stuff up and causing all kinds of grief for us. So we do keep it. It's an armor jacketed fiber optic cable. I actually have one hanging here in my office I could show you, but it's doesn't bend very much. It's pretty inflexible, but it's got a nice armored sheathing on it, and it gives us nice protection.
Yeah, I used to do low voltage data installation, so that was
okay.
purely for curiosity's sake.
Okay.
So I have 2 thoughts on the broadband forward request. One, I'm not sure that we would need to make that an action item, in which case we would need to put it on the agenda for next time. Does anyone have thoughts? I know we did a retro adjustment on like 2 or 3 small permits earlier in the year, actually late last year, I believe. So we're certainly, I think, open to that discussion. I just need to sort out how we would go about it. John, you turned your...
Yeah, that was for Bloomer Telephone, and those were applied for in late May and issued in June. That was literally like 3 or 4 weeks before we were certified. These permits here, the 17 that were issued in February 25th, invoice. So typically 30 days we would get our money, and then about 5 months later is when we were actually certified. And I'm afraid that if we start how far do we backtrack? That's my only concern, and I hope this isn't the case. But if you get permits in February, knowing we're going to be broadband certified sometime during the year, and then you don't pay your bill, I hope it wasn't malicious. But if they would have been issued and invoiced on a normal 30 or 60 day cycle like we would have, we would have moved on 4 or 5 months after that. We would have been certified, and then we would move forward at the broadband pricing. So I don't know if we're too flexible, then do we all of a sudden people are beating down the doors to say, well, I guess what we shouldn't have paid our bills, and now we want to credit back, and then how far do we go back, and then how much money do I have to give back out of time and effort that we have invested here? So
okay, can I comment on that? It certainly was never malicious in the intent. We have
and I don't mean to imply that, but I just when 5 months go by, that does cross my mind is, was it pre-planned to get reduced utility permits?
It wasn't intentional by that stretch. We did actually have a change. Well, part of our investment in part of the loan covenants is that we have to have a professional engineering firm that comes in and does all of our permitting. So Mid-States Consultants was the company at the time that did that. There were some performance issues with that company. They're no longer with us. So during that time, there was a gap there between when invoices were issued versus when we had. It's a complicated situation, but there was some miscommunications on our part internally to be able to get those invoices over to us in a fashion to be able to get those viewed and properly processed. To be honest with you, at the time as well too, by the time we did see them, I thought the county was already broadband certified. So whether it is or not as well too, I guess it's my ask is, look, we've put in a lot of investment to try to make this happen. I would just like it for optic standpoints to say that Dunn County and Mosaic are working together to make this happen, and this is what Dunn County is able to give to us to be able to show that they're endorsing the investment and wanting to make this happen.
And I have been holding the 2021 permits. They're right here in my mail basket on the corner of my desk until we get the 2020 issue resolved, because in 2 weeks we're coming up on a year of since these permits were issued without any payment. So I am holding the permits until the highway committee directs me otherwise.
Anyone else have anything to add at this point? Chairman Bartlett, and then Supervisor Maves.
A couple of questions. What's the difference in pricing? I think you said 7,600 for what is invoiced to them. What would it be if it was?
It would be a reduction of 5,900.
59. Okay.
Yep.
And then the other thing I was going to comment on is I'd have to go back in the timeline, but I know the broadband forward discussion took place a long time before we got certified. And the county board, I'd have to look back, but the county board, did the resolution way before we got certified. So I'm just throwing that out there. I think that would be a reason why we wouldn't have to go back on other ones, because we could look at when we did the resolution, when we started working on it, and anything before that definitely wouldn't be I would say wouldn't be considered, but maybe we consider the stuff after we started working on it or we passed the resolution at the county board level.
Yeah, I think we could certainly come up with a hard and fast deadline, which we would not consider stuff before that point. Supervisor Maves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I was also wondering what the value or the difference in value would be, but I would be in favor of going along and moving forward on this because of the importance of fiber optics, and I think it's been demonstrated we definitely need it. So I'd be in favor of moving forward on these permits and get the fiber in the ground.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else have anything to add? That sounds like that's the point of discussion we are at. Does anyone have an opinion on whether we need to put this on the agenda for next time as an agenda item so that it is an action item?
I think that would be the safest. Yes.
I agree.
Okay, so what I'm going to suggest, and I'll ask for the sense of the committee here, is that we put that as an action item for our next meeting, at which point we can have a little bit of further discussion and vote on whether to remit the 5,900, I believe it was, for the permitting, and what the hard deadline for possible remitted permits are in general. And for that, we'll want to take a look at when the county board authorized us to go for broadband forward and decide whether that's would be our hard deadline, or perhaps January 2020 or whatever. But I think that we would want to vote on where we would place consideration for remit as well at that point. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah, it does.
I'm not seeing any no's, so John, if you would put that on our agenda for next time, and we will sort it out then. Preston, thank you for chiming in, and we will get back to you on that as soon as we can.
Okay, sounds good. I know you don't have the date set, but do you have a rough idea when that next meeting would be?
It'll be the second Wednesday.
The 10th. It should be March 10th.
Oh, okay. 20, exactly a month from today. Okay.
Yeah, we always meet on the second Wednesday, which of course you wouldn't have in your head, but
No. Okay, sounds great. Do you need me for that meeting, or is there anything that you would like for that meeting beforehand in order to?
No, I think you've given us a pretty clear picture of what you're looking for and why, and we've all got our broadband forward caps on, having been discussing it on and off now for some time.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you much. I appreciate your guys' time and appreciate your consideration.
You are welcome, and we will be getting back to you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right, on to financial update.
Financial report. Marge sent out our monthly financial statement. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. ATV update information. I'll just kind of hit the basics before we go into more discussion here on the actions. I did some digging through here, and I cannot see where Jesse came up with the criteria. With mostly what I see is he kind of went with the state statutes and kind of pulled bits and pieces out of there, and some might have been just his best judgment. I don't know, is there anybody here on the committee that was here when we first put that out? I think everybody is I know I'm a newbie.
I was here at that point. I've just been moving all of my email over, so I have the email in which Jesse first mentions the ATV, and he does not explain it that in that email what his criteria were. So I did find that email and looked at it this week, in fact.
Okay.
So to the best,
go ahead, Kelly.
To the best of my knowledge, there's no record for exactly how he came to determine that particular set of criteria.
Yes, and I couldn't find anything within any of our drives or folders here electronically. Dustin didn't have anything. I went basically to the state statutes, and we have all the basic criteria basically morphed into our ordinance. And the only thing I can find is it's all basic information here. With the maximum speed of 35 miles an hour is kind of what Nick has on our ordinance. Otherwise, it's just basic state statutes, DNR, as far as the 18, the wearing the helmets, what classifies a ATV and a UTV, what the state recognizes. So when it comes down to our total length of what we want and the ADTs, I guess that's up to our highway committee and on what you guys would like to see. So any comments on what you guys would like to see before we drop down and actually discuss the nuts and bolts of these last few trails?
I guess my one question is, do you have strong feelings about what constitutes safe conditions in terms, relative to our,
Yep.
our current standards?
Yep. My big thing is I don't think they should exceed 35 miles an hour. I don't think that an ATV is not designed basically for pavement or a hard surface like that. So I would say our ordinance covers maximum speed anywhere in the county. If you're on the road, 35 miles, that makes sense to me. And then I would say definitely anything with an ADT above 1500, for sure, that would be a no. Reasonably 1,000, we're starting to get to where that's a lot more traffic than I would like to see. I know right now, I think you guys have always held to like that 500. To me, anything under 1,000 would seem reasonable. And
Okay.
then I'm not huge on, I could see the 2 miles if you're looking for my opinion on the length. 2 miles to me seems reasonable if I'm coming off a trail to get on the road, and 2 miles, but anything longer than 2 miles to me seems unreasonable. Then you should be in a passenger vehicle driving on the road if you really need to go longer than 2 miles. But that's just my 2 cents worth. And then as long as we're discussing it, we'll discuss the Kerryville Bridge. The deck length is 904 feet. And the state says anything longer than 1,000 is a no-no. Well, Carryville Bridge is 904 feet. It's a narrow bridge. Face of rail to face of rail is 27 feet. Now, what a UTV is classified as is anything 65 inches or less in width. So if you just throw out 5.5 feet, 66 inches, you would say I need a foot along between my UTV and the rail, and I'm going to need a foot on the other side. I'm looking at 7.5 feet of travel way with a UTV across the Kerryville Bridge. Now, if I take half of the 27 feet rail to rail, we're looking at basically a 13.5 foot lane travel way, no shoulder because of the narrow bridge. So we're taking up 7 or 7.5 feet of that 13.5 feet. So if you would either have to follow the UTV, it would be unsafe in my eyes to pass on the bridge. So those are just a couple of things that I am throwing out there. The other thing is, Dustin and I were discussing this the other day. When the Kerryville Bridge was constructed, evidently Dunn County did not have enough money to construct it. So the state constructed it. It's actually a state bridge. State takes care of all the maintenance and all the inspections. But when it's been discussed with the ATV routes in the past, because it's short of that 1,000 feet and we own the approaches and the right of way, Paul Gingras has told Dustin that it would ultimately be the highway committee's decision on what we would want to do. They would, because it's their bridge, their structure, but it doesn't meet all their criteria for them to chime in on it. It basically falls in your guys' hands. So.
Okay, so we'll put all that in the back of the head for the moment.
Yep.
While we go down to get the the action items knocked off, we'll do vouchers, and then we'll have the bigger discussion. If that's all right with everybody.
Okay. So anyway, that's the gist of what I was able to find. Our ordinance, nothing. I think Jesse just used his best judgment as an engineer on throwing some criteria together, and I think potentially you guys could amend it because there's nothing written in stone. So anyway, we can move on from there. That concludes my staff reports.
Excellent, thank you. Consideration of actions. if you have all had a chance to look at the vouchers, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Move we approve the vouchers.
Supervisor Johnson,
Seconded.
Supervisor Proctor seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Now on to the actual discussion, proper discussion of the ATV trail requests. The floor is open. Supervisor Hartung. Try hitting the space bar. Yeah, if you hold the space bar down, you should be able to speak.
Okay.
There you go.
I was wondering on that bridge in Kerryville, if you put a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit for vehicles, that would cut down on your passing, wouldn't it? And they wouldn't be able to pass on the bridge, on both sides of the bridge.
Yep. Basically from the 85 intersection, make it 35 probably until we get across the bridge and up to that First Town Road intersection. Reduce the speed.
Anybody have Randy?
Done. I guess I mean, we let snowmobiles cross this bridge. Why can snowmobiles cross it and UTVs can't? What's the difference on regulations on a snowmobile versus a UTV? I mean, if you look at safety issues, there's a lot more snowmobile deaths a year than there are UTVs,
Yep.
and yet there's a lot more UTV license than there are snowmobile license. It just doesn't make sense to me why we can let snowmobiles cross the bridge and UTVs not. I guess why is the difference?
Okay, so I have two quick thoughts. One of them is going to be a procedural thing, and one of them is just a response to Randy. I think that the snowmobile width versus UTV width would be one thing that we would have to think about, because you don't have snowmobiles are generally much narrower than the wider UTVs. But I think we should probably, in terms of not muddling the discussion too much, look at the criteria, the 1,000 feet, 2 mile, that stuff as one issue, and then look at the Kerryville Bridge separately rather than trying to hash both of those things out simultaneously. So what do we think about the, Brian?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Personally, I'm not real concerned about the mileage. They want to get from one trail head to the other trail. I'm concerned with the ADT. My thoughts are anything over 500, but sounds like that's way off. I'm way off, but I'm not concerned about the mileage personally. That's just my thought.
Mr. Chair, and out of all the ones that were submitted, that basically they're all the 2.5 and 2.25 miles. To me, that's within my reason of when I just threw out the 2 miles. There's only one on there that's 4 miles. That isn't the end of the world, but I think you guys need, as a group, I think we need to kind of, if we're going to move our line in the sand, we kind of have to have some sort of criteria out there. So there has to be a magical number. Is it going to be 2? Is it going to be 2.5? Is it going to be 4? I think we need some sort of criteria so we can kind of run these things through the gamut when a trail request is brought towards us. And otherwise, if we don't have a set of rules, then they're kind of, it's a free for all, and then they all kind of would apply. And only one has an ATD of 1,400, so that's the only one that kind of jumps out at me there. We're starting to get up there with a lot of traffic. So go ahead,
Brian?
John, I'm sorry I don't have that in front of me, but what was the ADT on the Highway M from 40 to MW?
that was 850 in 2019. So that we're still below 1,000 on that, Brian. And to me, it seems reasonable for what a lot of these other trails are for ADTs, what other county trails, when we look at like Chippewa, Eau Claire County, that's still below 1,000. The 850, to me, that seems within reason.
But that's a 4 mile stretch, isn't it? Or three and a half?
Yes. Yep. That's a 4 mile
That's-
stretch.
Kind of a scary one.
Yep. And that's a 24-foot wide blacktop mat with a 3-foot shoulder. So it's not one of our wider roads. You know, it's you're starting to get kind of congested there because of the width.
Well, and I know one of the criteria, I'll get to you in just a second. One of the criteria that we discussed when we were originally doing this was keeping the distances short, in part to encourage the ATVs onto the township roads and onto the smaller trunks and lower traffic roads in general. And I think that's probably a good principle to continue. I mean, where exactly we draw that line is going to be one of the things we were discussing today, but I think that's a pretty good, I think we would like to continue to encourage that to be the case. Supervisor Maves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Supervisor Johnson as far as the 500 number. I would not like to see that increased over that. That's and I also agree with the comment that you just made that we need to, if we are going to, I guess, promote them on town roads and not the county roads, because I understand that it's a lot of people out there just want to have it, go any place. And here again, I go back to if that's what you want, then license them just like a motorcycle or a car, and then you can go any place you want to go. So I guess I would support the 500 maximum as far as the daily thing. And I would limit the mileage thing to 1 mile personally. So thank you.
So I'm hearing we have two strongly in support of ADT at cap at 500. Is anyone strongly in support of bumping that up? I certainly think that with John's recommendation, it should not go over 1,000. Is anyone, Randy, you look like you're.
Well, Polk County opened all their county roads up, and I know they're over 1,000, and they don't have any issues up there. So it's just something that is coming. Like I said, I don't have one of these, and I don't really care, but I think it's coming that they do want to at least get routes connected, and I understand that. It's getting more popular, and more people are using them. So,
Dave, Joe, do either one of you have any thoughts on the ADT? Supervisor Hartung?
It's 500, that's 500 cars a day or 500 cars how are they measuring that?
Yeah, 500 cars a day on that section of road.
Average daily travel.
Yep.
Dave?
Well, it definitely has a impact on tourism in the county. I don't know. I do most of my riding up by my cabin. I have one. I enjoy it, but we ride mostly dirt fire lanes and logging roads. But when you do come out to a corner and you want to continue on to the next trail, it's awful nice to be able to ride the road. And I know in Bayfield County, there's some county roads, and there's a lot of townships are wide open, but a number of county roads are open. So I haven't heard of any accidents up there or any problems. I've been down to by Black River Falls, and there's an awful lot of county roads being ridden there. So I don't know. I totally understand you know, where you're coming from with that number though. I'm more concerned myself. I'm more concerned on our town roads because of the hills and the curves and the narrow road, and you know, that they drive 35 miles an hour. I'm more concerned on our town roads having an accident than on our county roads that tend to be better sight distance and a little wider.
Okay, we seem to have slowed down a bit here. I don't really have a stake. Again, I'm like Randy, I don't own one of these things, and it's not something I'm hugely interested in. I do think we want to make sure that we are careful about safety. I think we might consider an interim step and then maybe revisit this in a year, possibly bump up to say ADT of 800. I think we'd like to keep the mileage around 2 miles or lower, or very close to that. I think that's probably not a bad place. Or if we're gonna bump it up, maybe try 2.5 miles. I think 4 is probably beyond what we would like to see. I'm trying to think what the other criteria. Those are the two main ones we were talking about reviewing. Does anyone have any? Does that sound like a place to start to people, or do we want to vote on keeping it at 500 first, or sense of the committee on that? Randy?
Yeah, I guess it all depends on the road. I mean, you know, 1 mile sounds good if it's got to travel at 1,000, 2,000. But if you've got a county road that's only got 400 on it, I don't see why we can't go 2 miles or 3 miles or whatever the length is. I think it all depends on the combination of the travel and the distance instead of just setting a hard limit on one or the other. I think you got to use both of them in combination.
I agree with Randy on that. Totally. I really do. It's the ADT that scares me. The length doesn't scare me. I just feel as if some of these county roads are shooting off to different township roads that are within a half a mile of each other. They just wanted to open some of these county roads so they can get from one township road to the other, then vice versa as they go up and around and get back on. That's just my thoughts.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, John?
can I comment?
Please.
What happens if you guys looked at every trail request on an individual basis? And then this would be my recommendation. Typically they come in October to make the request. We could either keep it October or we could move it up. But once they've made their trail requests, if it would be all right with you guys, I could go and get the big van from Central Fleet, and then essentially we would have an interim meeting to where I would pack all you guys in that van and we would go on a road tour, and physically we could drive each trail segment. We could sit at the intersection, the town road intersection, looking at the county, and then every trail would be reviewed on an individual basis. And then we would have the same factors. And I could say, hey, you know what, here's the ADT, and then we could drive this trail section, and then it would all be based on the information you guys would have at hand, but actually have eyes on it. And then you could kind of say, well, if I was sitting in a UTV, would this feel safe for me? But you would all have a real world experience on each trail segment. I'd even buy lunch if COVID goes away.
Okay, Brian likes it. Anyone else? That looks like it. Oh, Supervisor Maves.
Yes, that sounds good to me. I think that's a logical one, and I would endorse that. Yes.
Because I agree with Randy that certain criteria might not work in one scenario, but yeah, if there's only 350 cars a day and there's only 2 homes maybe on that whole section of road, maybe 3 miles isn't unreasonable. But I think if we actually were in a vehicle and you guys could actually see this segment and say, well, if I was put yourself in a UTV, would you feel safe? Then you guys would have some real world experience on what your decision would be based on. And we have the big van over in Central Fleet, so we can all pile in and drive these segments.
I am broadly open to that. One thing I might think that would simplify and speed up that process is if we just choose to do that for the things that basically are an exception to our to whatever our standards are.
Oh, I really like that's a great idea, Kelly. Yes.
But we have to get our standards down first, don't we?
Yeah, we either need to say that anything that's an exception to our current standards, or adjust the standards and say anything that's an exception to those standards. It would certainly shorten this meeting if we went with current standards, but I'm quite open to saying, bumping that up a little bit, given John's safety recommendations. Does anyone have a strong opinion whether we should hold with the current standards and then go out for a physical review of things that don't do that, or change the current standards and go out for physical review things that are whatever the new standards are at? So in the interest of just a quick look, thumbs up for current standards, thumbs down for new standards. So if you like the current standards and want to go with that and go out on the van to look at things that don't meet the current standards, thumbs up. If you want to change the current standards, quick thumbs down. So change. Okay, so it looks like we have a majority for changing the current standards at least a little bit. In the interest of doing this relatively quickly, I like the idea of tying ADT to distance. Say, if we were to set a standard of 500 ADT for up to a 4-mile stretch, 800 ADT for a 3-mile stretch, would that be a good intermittent, a good step in the process? Does that, for 800 for 2-mile stretch? Chuck, I know you've got some pretty strong feelings about the safety of this. And then
I'd
Joe,
say
right after. Okay, so
Supervisor
Joe had his
Hartung.
hand up, and then
Yeah,
Joe.
say the 800 for a 2-mile stretch and the longer for a lesser amount of vehicle.
Okay. Chuck?
Yeah, I would go along with the 800 for a 2-mile stretch, and 500, for
For up
4
to 4.
miles. Yeah, and I guess I'd just like to relate back to what John was saying as far as if the ADT drivers would feel safe. I'm more concerned about the other driver, the car drivers, who's coming along and not expecting an ATV.
Yep.
There all of a sudden, because the UTV people are going to say, well, yeah, we're safe, we're good to go. It's the other people who aren't expecting these vehicles on the roads is my more concern. So that's all. But
Kelly, can I throw a motion out there?
Absolutely, I would love one.
I would move that we set the criteria at 800 ADT for 2 miles, 600 ADT for 3 miles, and 500 ADT for 4 miles.
Do we have a second? Supervisor Hartung second. So motion by Supervisor Johnson, seconded by Supervisor Hartung. Discussion. Chuck, did you have a? Was the hand up for?
No, I was just going to second that motion. That, I mean, we got to move on someplace here.
Yep.
So it is a starting point, and
Great.
so that's all.
Further discussion? Supervisor Hartog.
All these roads will be marked with signage, so they should be expecting them.
Okay, further discussion on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all in favor of adjusting the ADT and distance criteria to Supervisor Johnson's motion, say aye.
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 Any opposition? Motion passes. Okay, so we now have a working new criteria, and we'll need to go out and look at stuff that they suggest that, and we probably want to have some place where we're like, no, that's ridiculous. We're not. There's no point in looking at that. But let's push that out to next year. I mean, if we have a 1500, John was saying that's right out. So I don't think we're going to look at that. Brian?
Well, I'm just wondering if we're going to look at the suggestions that were brought to us prior to this.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we'll want to do is, well, we need to take a quick look at the others. John, do you want to look at adjusting those? And we could have a motion to approve all of the trail segments that are currently on the list that fit the new criteria.
Yep.
And then put the ones that do not fit that criteria off to a future inspection date or possibly to next year when we do the run. Is that?
Yep, Kelly, I'm just going through here. It looks like most of them will meet the criteria.
That's what I was thinking.
Yep.
So do I have a motion to approve all of the trail segments that are currently on the docket that fit the new criteria?
I so move.
Supervisor Prochnow
Second.
moves. Supervisor Johnson seconds. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I have one. I'm concerned
Okay.
with that M1 now. Refresh my memory. North from 40. That will not meet it, correct?
No, that will not, because we're 4 miles and we would only allow a 500 ADT on that.
Thanks, John.
So right now, Kelly, on our list, the only two that would not qualify that we would have to take a consideration to look at would be number 2, which would be County Trunk East South, 730th to 730th in Red Cedar and Springbrook. That one has an ADT of 1400. So right now that one's off the table. And then number 11, which is County Trunk M, which is State Trunk Highway 40 to County Trunk MW, Colfax, Town of Grant. That's the 4 mile segment with an 850 ADT. Those are the only two, as I'm going through this list, that would not meet our criteria.
Okay.
Question.
Randy?
Are we discussing the Kerry Bridge deal yet, or is that going to be put off?
That's,
or what's
once we get through all of this, then I want to get to Kerryville, because. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor that would approve all of those except for the M segment and the E segment. Any further discussion on that part of this? Dave? Nope. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any opposition? Okay, that motion passes.
Kelly, if I can interrupt just to make it
Please.
clear. Last month, you guys approved 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And now we've approved everything on the list of 16, with the exceptions of number 2 and number 11 are the only two that would not move forward at this time. So just
That is my understanding, yes.
clear on that. Perfect.
I would recommend that we leave the E and the M then until the next time actually, I guess we have to decide whether or not we want to go out and look at them sooner or later. Does anyone object to putting those off till the next time we go through all of this, or do you want to? Okay, so Supervisor Hartung.
I think the ATV club should be happy they approved as many as we did. We're only supposed to do like 5 or 6, right?
Yeah, that would be my general consideration. Okay, so those two are not approved for now, but we will consider them if they bring them back next time. Great.
When you say next time, Kelly, you're saying at their next October request. So right now they're off the table until later this year.
Yeah, unless I hear an objection to that, I think that's where we're at. Okay, that's where we are at.
So we would not do a field review of those unless they are brought back by the ATV club. Then we would schedule a in-field review and move forward at that time.
Yeah, unless we decide like a 1,000 hard cap or some ADT hard cap, because I know you were saying that 1,500 was a really hard cap and you weren't really thrilled about anything over 1,000.
No, correct.
And I think that's probably a good place to be, but we'll just put that off for the next time around because we're not going to deal with it right now. Okay, that brings us to discussing the Kerryville Bridge, and it's its own thing. So, thoughts on the Kerryville Bridge, folks?
I guess.
Randy?
Same thing as I've always said. I drive a lot of these roads. I drive roads all day long, so I see all kinds of things. Across the Kerryville Bridge, I don't understand how you can have snowmobiles. They'd have less control how they steer than a four-wheeler does going across the bridge. I have Amish buggies going over this bridge that they don't go no 35 miles per hour last time I was following them. And you can't pass them either. Besides all the farm equipment that goes across that bridge, when you got to wait for them to cross the bridge before you can even get on the bridge. I don't see where a UTV is going to be any more dangerous than any of the other stuff I see across this bridge or any other bridge that or any other township that I go in. Like I say, I see Amish buggies all the time. And like I say, even this last winter, it's foggier and heck, you couldn't even see in front of you. You got Amish kids walking to school in Amish buggies, and I just don't see UTV is going to be any more dangerous than anything else. It makes sense. That's the only connecting route between southern Chippewa River and northern Chippewa River, the only place to cross that bridge.
It's the only county bridge between Eau Claire and Minnesota. Yeah. Believe it or not. That's kind of crazy. You wouldn't think that, but
I just think with everything else that crosses that bridge, I just don't see where UTVs are going to be any more dangerous than a snowmobile.
I think the key would have it properly signed so people are aware of potential. There's going to be UTVs in your travel way or oncoming travel way. Signage, I think, is going to be key.
Yeah, it is a good sight distance there. I mean, like I said, I cross that bridge a lot, and like I say, I meet a lot of different things on that bridge. I just don't think UTVs are going to be any worse than anything else on that bridge. So.
Anyone else? Supervisor Johnson.
John, what about Joe's suggestion of putting it at a 35 miles an hour? I don't know the length of span. I'm not familiar at all. I don't think I've ever been over it, but how far is it from the main road? Was that a county road then? County intersection?
Nope, that's State Highway 85. And okay. I would say maybe 700-800 feet, if I'm guessing. I don't think it's more than 1,000 feet from the intersection to the bridge. It's relatively short distance.
And then from the bridge to the next town road, you mentioned something like that.
Yeah, that I would say is probably 1,500 to 2,000 feet, if I'm guessing correctly.
Well, I was just wondering about the 35 miles an hour. Maybe that's too long a span. I don't know.
Yep.
But. Just to get a mental picture of the bridge, if I'm remembering correctly, John, it's 950 feet of bridge deck.
904 feet. Yep.
904.
Of actual bridge deck structure.
And the enclosed space is what,
Um,
1,100?
yeah, 11 or 1,200 total, because there's probably at least 150 to 250 feet on each side where there's beam guard wrapped in until it goes down to the boat landing on the northwest corner quadrant. So I would say give or take 1,200, 1,250 feet, you're committed where it's a fairly narrow access way. We're back to the signage. I'm not going to say people don't go over that bridge at 60, because if I said they didn't, I know if Dustin put a traffic counter out there, they would prove me wrong. As is, they come 65 into 70 into Elk Mound on H from the south. When you actually look at the traffic counter data, people really surprise us. So, but it's a relatively straight, wide open structure. There is good visibility, but like Randy says, if you meet a piece of farm equipment, they're committed on going across, and you might be waiting on one end or the other. Whether it's a pickup or a UTV, if you came into the farm equipment, but in your travel way, if there's a UTV there, you're kind of committed to following that UTV until you can safely, because I do believe that is striped dual no passing on the bridge. So you have to wait your turn. It's 904 feet. It's not the end of the world if they're going 35 and you're going 35.
Anyone else have a? Supervisor Hartog.
Do you just put like a 1 year on it, just a trial, and if it doesn't work out, pull the plug?
We could certainly do that. I might be inclined to vote for that. The narrowness of the bridge is I think a concern. So I'm really not sold one way or another, but I could certainly be open to a 1 year trial period if the committee is interested in that. Randy?
Chairman, I'll make a motion. We'll have a 1 year trial on the bridge, Kerryville Bridge. Get the right signage out there, and we'll do a 1 year, see how it works, and we'll go from there.
Mr. Chair, can I comment one more time?
Absolutely.
I've crossed it on a snowmobile, and it is a little bit scary because you don't have, with your Skags, it's typically plowed off because Dunn County Highway does a good job of plowing it off. I've never, in 25 years of being out here, I've never had or heard of an issue with somebody smashing a snowmobile or a fatality, an injury, or anything with snowmobiles crossing it. I know ATVs cross it right now. I've not been aware of any issues. So with that said, I don't think it's going to hurt to give it a whirl.
Okay, do we, so Randy made the motion. Did we, I don't believe we have a second yet. Do we have a second? Supervisor Hartung seconds. Any further discussion on giving it a 1 year trial period to see what we think about how that works? Seeing no further discussion. All in favor of opening the Kerryville Bridge on a 1 year trial basis? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. We are going to open it up for 1 year. And that finally concludes our ATV discussion from October for this year. No, so we normally have to bring the ATV trail opening forward as a resolution to the county board, I believe is how we do that.
Yep.
We do not, however, have it as a consideration for resolutions and ordinances to be recommended to the county board in the agenda.
What I
So
will
we
do is I will draft, Kelly, everything that we talked about today, everything that we talked about in January's meeting. I'll have Nick review it and I'll have it ready to present to Dave. I'm assuming this is going to go to exec first. Yep. So I'll have it all with Nick's blessing ready to go to exec for next month.
Perfect. That sounds great. Next meeting date is March 10th. Does anyone else have anything that we need to bring up? Seeing none, we are adjourned.
Bye.
And we will see.
Like